I have finished another book. This one is Cold Cases, True Crime Collection by Cheyna Roth. This is an interesting, and as you can see from the channel, I read a lot of true crime books. This particular one is another collection of a lot of cases. They're all unsolved. The interesting part with this is possibly the author's tone. I originally started out thinking that this book was maybe a little irreverent in how she was addressing some of these cases. That ended up not really being the case, though. Her sarcasm and kind of way she talked about things that came through was much more aimed at the murderers or people who were fascinated by certain aspects of different cases, because she does talk about two cases that don't have anything to do with a murder. She talks about the D.B. Cooper case, and she talks about the Garland Museum art heist, and sort of addresses, like, kind of the fascination with D.B. Cooper and sort of the fascination with murder as opposed to crimes where things that are non-violent happen in the Gardner heist. But she really sort of zeroes in about certain things with certain cases, about how those things kind of take off and get a life of their own. As you can see, the cover is one of the mug shots of the Black Dahlia from the Black Dahlia case. Before she was murdered, she had been arrested once, and she was her mug shot is kind of where the jumping off point for the author. And it's kind of the jumping off point because she talks about how this woman was sort of turned into nothing more than a pretty dead woman. And that's something that you see a lot. And I've seen commentary and different things too on podcasts when they talk about famous dead blondes, when they're speaking about Marilyn Monroe or Jane Mansfield, things like that, where they're kind of focusing on the crime is focused on in sort of a very, very peculiar way because of who the person who was murdered was. She also goes in on the Zodiac killer and sort of the theory she has about what type of person this man would have been. She goes in on the Natalie Holloway case, is the one I was thinking of. The Natalie Holloway case, she goes in on about why there was just such a media circus about this one particular missing girl, and kind of focuses on the sort of long-standing thing we had at that time. It's kind of petered out a little bit, but focuses on this long-standing thing of a particular type of basically pretty white woman who would go missing, and sort of the media frenzy that would happen at certain points over this, because people go missing all the time. And this case just ended up being, in fact, another one even happened on Aruba. She talks about very recently in there, but the focus was completely that. And it's this sort of cross-section between the parents having influence and getting involved in stuff, and people focusing, the media focusing and fascination on certain things about certain people. So she goes in on that. She goes into the JonBenet Ramsey case, and the whole way she kind of focuses on that fact that it was just a debacle from the beginning, of how it was handled, how the family was handled, what they were allowed to do, and how the crime scene was just completely botched from the very beginning. And it's kind of an interesting thing because she doesn't just sort of tell these cold cases from the general just factual telling of the situation. She very much goes into what she thinks is kind of the interesting thing in the case. And when I say that, I mean it's the interesting thing that she is not so much interested in the murder. It's more or the actual crime or what has happened. She's more interested in the focus of why that has become such a phenomenon, why certain unsolved crimes are such phenomena. And the one she winds it up with is the Golden State Killer, which is ironically not a cold case anymore. It is a case that has been solved. It was a long time it was a cold case, but she goes into detail on that killer in the most derogatory terms as well, in what he did, and sort of, I think that might be the interesting part, was with how she speaks about these people who did these crimes that have not been caught, and how she speaks about them in no way impressed. I think maybe that's the thing with true crime that so often it puts me off, is the fact that so many times people speak sort of in this weird, odd tone about serial killers and murderers and things like that. And that, to me, has always been very odd, because anybody can kill anybody. It's not a special talent. And for all these podcasts and true crime things and different things like that to speak about people who do horrible things in sort of this weirdly mythological light, that's kind of off-putting. And that is what she does not do. She speaks of them in a very, this person was, just the absolute horriblest, and nothing they did was special, and they literally, like the Zodiac Killer, this was literally somebody who was a perfectionist, who couldn't even do his killing stuff right. And, she goes in on these different things about that these people who did these crimes are by no means some sort of brilliant Hannibal Lecter sort of situation here. And I think that's interesting, because this is one of the few books that I have ever read that has sort of taken that tone about murderers in any sort of case. Now, like I said, these are cases that we don't know who it is, except for the last one, because they're cold cases, but she does very much focus on the fact of these are little men. These are people with no accomplishments who do these sort of crimes, and at least the murder ones. Now, the Gardner heist one, she seems a little more interested in, about the angle of actually pulling this off and how it was done. But everybody else, even D.B. Cooper, she basically goes in on the fact that he was he was basically pretty much an unsuccessful robber, and that's kind of addressed in the fact that everybody thinks he's so cool and this and that, when his plan was really not that good, and his execution of the plan not that good. It was maybe just sort of the aura around it that ended up happening. So this ends up being very, very interesting in how the author kind of addresses the cases, and I ended up actually liking it a lot. So I would suggest reading this one, even if you're not really into true crime, because she goes in hard on some of these strange fascinations, maybe unhealthy fascinations with certain cases and different things.